Act 1. The Enigma of Nuremberg. On a sunny afternoon, Whit Monday, May 26, 1828, the quiet, medieval streets of Nuremberg, Germany, witnessed a bizarre and unsettling sight. A young man, perhaps 16 or 17 years old, stumbled into the Unschlittplatz square. His gait was unsteady, like a toddler learning to walk. His clothes were ill-fitting and peasant-like, yet strangely clean. His eyes, vacant and overwhelmed, struggled to adjust to the bright daylight, as if seeing the world for the very first time. He clutched a small, sealed envelope in his hand. Locals stared, perplexed by this strange apparition who seemed to have materialized out of thin air. Two shoemakers eventually approached the boy. He seemed unable to comprehend their questions, uttering only a few repetitive phrases in a thick, almost unintelligible Bavarian dialect. The phrases were, "I want to be a cavalryman like my father was, and don't know." He pointed towards the envelope. Intrigued and concerned, the shoemakers took the boy and the letter to the home of Captain von Wesnig, the commander of the 4th Squadron of the 6th Cavalry Regiment, whose address was on the envelope. The captain was not home, but his servants took the boy in. They offered him meat and beer, but he spat them out violently, reacting as if they were poison. He eagerly accepted only black bread and water. When given pen and paper, he painstakingly wrote a single name, Kaspar Hauser. Inside the envelope was a letter, dated from the Bavarian border / the place is unnamed / 1828. The anonymous writer claimed to be a poor laborer who had cared for the boy in secret since infancy, never letting him take a single step out of my house. The writer stated they had taught him to read, write, and understand Christianity, but had kept him completely isolated. The letter concluded with a stark instruction to Captain von Wesnig: either train the boy to be a cavalryman or hang him. Tucked inside with this letter was another, supposedly written by Kaspar's mother years earlier, claiming his birth date was April 30th, 1812, and that his father, a cavalryman of the 6th Regiment, was deceased. Captain von Wesnig, upon returning home, was utterly baffled. The boy could barely walk, seemed terrified of horses, and possessed the mental faculties of a small child, yet he could write his own name. He appeared healthy but bewildered, his senses overwhelmed by the sights and sounds of the city. He spent hours simply staring into space or playing with a small toy horse. Unable to make sense of the situation, von Wesnig handed the boy over to the local police. Kaspar Hauser, as he called himself, became an instant sensation, a prisoner, a patient, and a public spectacle all at once. He was housed in the city jail tower, under the care of a jailer named Andreas Hiltel. Word of the strange, wild child, found in Nuremberg spread like wildfire. Doctors, lawyers, clergymen, and curious citizens flocked to see him. They observed his strange habits, his apparent aversion to all food except bread and water, his childlike wonder at simple objects like mirrors and candles, his hypersensitivity to noise and light, and his seemingly complete ignorance of the world. Who was this boy? Where had he come from? And what unspeakable darkness had hidden him from the world for his entire life? The mystery of Kaspar Hauser had begun, captivating the imagination of all of Europe and sparking a debate that would rage for nearly 2 centuries. Act 2. The Awakening Mind. Under the care of his jailer and the intense scrutiny of Nuremberg's finest minds, Kaspar Hauser began a remarkable, almost miraculous, transformation. He was a blank slate, a mind untouched by the complexities of human society, and his rapid development fascinated and confounded his observers. His initial state was pitiable. His feet were soft and blistered, suggesting he had barely ever walked. His eyes, accustomed to darkness, were pained by daylight. He initially showed no awareness of social conventions, possessed limited language, and reacted to the world with the naive wonder and fear of a very young child. Yet he also displayed an astonishing capacity for learning. Recognizing the unique nature of the case, the city authorities placed Kaspar under the guardianship of George Friedrich Daumer, a kind and intelligent schoolmaster. Daumer took Kaspar into his own home and began the painstaking process of educating him. The results were extraordinary. Kaspar quickly learned to speak, read, and write with fluency. He showed a natural aptitude for drawing and expressed himself with a simple, almost poetic honesty. He began to recount fragmented memories of his life before Nuremberg. He described spending his entire existence in a dark, confined space, perhaps only 6 or 7 feet long, where he sat on a straw floor. He never saw his keeper, who provided him with bread and water while he slept. His only companions were 2 small wooden toy horses. Shortly before his release, he claimed, a mysterious man began visiting him. This man taught him to walk, to say his few phrases, and to write the name Kaspar Hauser, before finally leading him to the outskirts of Nuremberg and abandoning him. Kaspar's senses seemed uniquely attuned. Having lived in darkness, his night vision was reportedly phenomenal. He claimed to be able to distinguish colors in the dark and read the smallest print by moonlight. He also possessed an incredibly acute sense of smell, sometimes identifying people or objects from a distance based on their scent alone. Conversely, he was highly sensitive to sounds, smells, and even magnetic fields, often suffering from headaches or seizures when exposed to stimuli that others barely noticed. His story and unique characteristics made him a celebrity. He was visited by scholars, artists, and aristocrats from across Europe. The renowned legal scholar Anselm von Feuerbach, president of the Bavarian Court of Appeals, took a particular interest, becoming convinced that Kaspar was the victim of a dark crime, possibly of noble origin. Kaspar became known as the Child of Europe, a symbol of natural innocence corrupted by civilization, or perhaps a living clue to a hidden scandal. But fame brought danger. On October 17, 1829, while Kaspar was alone in Daumer's house, a hooded figure allegedly attacked him. Kaspar claimed the man struck him on the forehead with a sharp instrument, causing a bleeding wound. He described the attacker as having whispered, "You still have to die ere you leave the city of Nuremberg." The attack, though not severe, terrified Kaspar and his protectors. Was it his original keeper, trying to silence him? Or someone else, afraid of what Kaspar might remember or represent? Security around him was increased, but the incident added a sinister layer to his already mysterious existence. Skeptics, however, whispered that the wound might have been self-inflicted, a cry for attention from a boy perhaps struggling under the weight of public expectation. The enigma of Kaspar Hauser was deepening, evolving from a curious case into a potentially deadly mystery. Act 3. The Prince in the Dungeon? As Kaspar Hauser learned more about the world, and the world learned more about him, a sensational theory began to take shape, fueled by the romantic imagination of the era and the pronouncements of influential figures like Anselm von Feuerbach. Could this mysterious foundling, with his strange sensitivities and noble bearing, actually be of royal blood? Specifically, could he be the lost hereditary Prince of Baden? The theory centered around the Grand Duchy of Baden, a small German state. In 1812, the same year listed as Kaspar's birth date in the mysterious letter, the hereditary prince was born to Grand Duke Karl and his wife, Stephanie de Beauharnais, an adopted daughter of Napoleon Bonaparte. Tragically, the infant prince reportedly died just 16 days after his birth under circumstances that seemed suspiciously sudden. The timing was crucial. Grand Duke Karl had no other male heirs. According to the succession laws of Baden, if Karl died without a direct male heir, the throne would pass to his unpopular uncles from a morganatic line, a marriage between people of unequal social rank. However, there was another player, Karl's ambitious step-grandmother, the Countess Louise Caroline von Hochberg. The Countess desperately wanted her own sons from the morganatic line to inherit the throne. The theory proposed a chilling conspiracy. The Countess von Hochberg, perhaps with the help of others at court, had orchestrated the abduction of the healthy newborn prince. They replaced him with a dying or already dead infant, fooling the grieving parents and securing the line of succession for the Hochberg sons. The real prince, according to this theory, was smuggled away and eventually hidden in the dark dungeon that Kaspar Hauser later described, kept alive but ignorant of his identity until he was released 16 years later in Nuremberg. This theory, though seemingly fantastical, gained considerable traction. Proponents pointed to several pieces of circumstantial evidence. Kaspar Hauser reportedly bore a resemblance to members of the Baden family, particularly Grand Duke Karl. His refined features and innate dignity seemed out of place for someone raised as a peasant. Anselm von Feuerbach became a passionate advocate for this theory, publishing pamphlets that hinted strongly at a connection between Kaspar and the Baden succession mystery. He believed Kaspar was the victim of a dynastic crime of unparalleled cruelty. Furthermore, the timing of Kaspar's appearance in 1828 was significant. Grand Duke Karl had died in 1818. His uncle Ludwig succeeded him, but died childless in 1830. This meant the throne then passed to Ludwig's half-brother Leopold, the son of the very Countess von Hochberg accused of orchestrating the original kidnapping. Kaspar's appearance, therefore, came just as the Hochberg line was poised to take power, potentially disrupting their claim if his true identity were revealed. However, the Baden prince theory was far from universally accepted, even during Kaspar's lifetime. Skeptics pointed out the lack of any direct evidence connecting Kaspar to the royal family. The letters found with him made no mention of Baden or royalty. His dialect was Bavarian, not Alemannic, the dialect spoken in Baden, and many questioned the plausibility of keeping a child in total isolation for 16 years without severe physical and mental deformities, which Kaspar, despite his initial state, did not seem to possess to the expected degree. Was Kaspar Hauser the lost Prince of Baden, a living testament to a dark royal secret? Or was he simply a pawn in a political game, his mysterious origins conveniently fitting a narrative that served the agendas of others? The debate raged, adding another layer of intrigue and danger to Kaspar's already precarious life. If he truly was the heir to a throne, then his existence was a threat to powerful people who might go to extreme lengths to ensure he remained silent forever. Act 4. The Skeptical Earl and the Final Years. After the alleged assassination attempt in 1829, Kaspar Hauser's life became increasingly unsettled. He was moved from guardian to guardian, his presence becoming a burden and a source of controversy. The intense public scrutiny continued, but the initial wave of sympathy began to wane, replaced by growing skepticism. Was his story of confinement entirely true? Were his unique sensitivities genuine, or part of an elaborate performance? In 1831, a wealthy and eccentric British nobleman, Lord Stanhope, became fascinated by the Kaspar Hauser case. Stanhope traveled to Germany, met Kaspar, and quickly became convinced of his noble origins. He lavished money on Kaspar, funding investigations into his past and promising to take him to England. Stanhope effectively took over Kaspar's guardianship, moving him away from Nuremberg to the smaller town of Ansbach, placing him under the care of yet another schoolmaster, Johann Georg Meyer. Meyer, however, was far less sympathetic than Kaspar's previous guardian, Daumer. He found Kaspar to be prone to lying, vanity, and laziness. His reports to Lord Stanhope painted an increasingly negative picture of the young man. Stanhope himself began to have doubts. His own investigations into Kaspar's origins failed to yield any concrete evidence of a connection to the Baden family. He grew frustrated with Kaspar's inconsistencies and what he perceived as attention-seeking behavior. During this period, Kaspar suffered another mysterious incident. In 1833, he claimed to have accidentally shot himself with a pistol while alone in his room. The wound was minor, but the circumstances were suspicious. Was it truly an accident? Another attempt on his life? Or, as Meyer and Stanhope increasingly suspected, another self-inflicted wound designed to garner sympathy and attention? Lord Stanhope's relationship with Kaspar deteriorated rapidly. He accused Kaspar of being an imposter and publicly distanced himself from the case. This was a devastating blow to Kaspar. Stanhope had represented his best hope for uncovering his past and securing his future. Now, he found himself isolated in Ansbach, under the care of a skeptical guardian, his credibility questioned, and his future uncertain. Kaspar continued his education and took up a position as a copyist in the local law office. He maintained his story of confinement and his belief in his noble birth, but the world was losing interest. The child of Europe was becoming a local curiosity, a young man trapped between a mysterious past and an uncertain future. His defenders, like Anselm von Feuerbach, had passed away. His detractors were growing louder. He was increasingly alone, haunted by the enigma of his own existence. And the final, fatal act of his tragic life was about to unfold. Act 5. The Knife in the Park. On the cold afternoon of December 14th, 1833, Kaspar Hauser stumbled back into his guardian Meyer's house in Ansbach, clutching his side. He was pale and weak, gasping for breath. He managed to utter that he had been lured to the Ansbach Court Garden, a local park, by a stranger who promised to reveal information about his mother. Once there, Kaspar claimed the stranger did not give him information but instead handed him a small purple purse and then stabbed him deeply in the chest before fleeing. Kaspar led Meyer and a police officer back to the park. They found the small, violet purse lying on the ground. Inside was a cryptic note, written in mirror writing, Spiegelschrift. The note was confusing and contradictory. It read, "Hauser will be able to tell you quite precisely how I look and from where I am. To save Hauser the trouble, I want to tell you myself from where I come __ I come from __ the Bavarian border __ on the river __ I will even tell you the name, M.L.O." Kaspar was taken back home, his condition rapidly deteriorating. The wound was severe, penetrating his lung. Doctors were summoned, but little could be done. Over the next 3 days, Kaspar lingered in agony, repeating his account of the attack. He died on December 17, 1833, at the age of perhaps 21. His final words were reportedly a jumble of prayers and questions about his origins. The investigation into his murder was immediate, but ultimately fruitless. The description Kaspar gave of his attacker was vague. The note found in the purse was bizarre and led nowhere. The initials M.L.O. meant nothing to anyone. Suspicion immediately fell upon Kaspar himself. Could this have been his final, most desperate act of self-harm, designed to reignite public sympathy or perhaps even end a life that had become unbearable? The nature of the wound troubled investigators. It was a deep, precise stab, angled downwards into the chest. Some doctors argued it was unlikely to be self-inflicted. Others contended that it was possible, especially for someone seeking to create a dramatic but supposedly non-fatal wound that accidentally went too deep. The fact that Kaspar had apparently injured himself twice before fueled the suicide/self-harm theory. Adding to the confusion, the note in the purse contained grammatical errors that were characteristic of Kaspar's own writing. No assassin was ever found. No conspiracy was ever proven. Kaspar Hauser's death was as mysterious as his life. He was buried in Ansbach, his tombstone bearing the Latin inscription, Hic jacet Kasparus Hauser, enigma sui temporis, ignota nativitas, occulta mors. Here lies Kaspar Hauser, riddle of his time, unknown birth, mysterious death. For over 150 years, the riddle endured. Was he a feral child, kept in isolation by some unknown cruel parent or guardian? Was he the lost Prince of Baden, victim of a ruthless dynastic plot? Or was he a clever imposter, a pathological liar who fooled Europe? The advent of DNA technology offered a tantalizing possibility of finally solving the mystery. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, several attempts were made to compare DNA extracted from bloodstains found on Kaspar Hauser's clothing to the DNA of living descendants of the Baden royal family. The results were contradictory and plagued by issues of sample contamination and differing methodologies. One test suggested no match, supporting the imposter theory. Another test, using different markers and samples, suggested a match was plausible, rekindling the prince theory. As of today, the DNA evidence remains inconclusive and highly debated. Kaspar Hauser remains an enigma. His story challenges our understanding of identity, memory, and the very nature of human development. Was he a victim or a perpetrator? A prince or a pauper? A blank slate or a master manipulator? Perhaps the only certainty is that his short, bewildering life and his dark, unresolved death continue to haunt us, a true riddle of his time and ours.